After a 14-hour hospital shift, I went to surprise my fiancée. A guy answered her door in socks and said, "She's busy. Want me to tell her you came?" When she peeked around the corner and saw me, I came off a 14-hour shift with the kind of exhaustion that sits behind the eyes and refuses to move. The department had been loud all day, not with shouting but with the constant noise of alarms, carts, and feet. 2 trauma codes overlapped. One patient did not make it. Another lived, barely, and the family thanked everyone except me, which was fine. Gratitude is unpredictable in those moments. What mattered was that my hands were steady and my decisions were clean. When the charge nurse finally waved me out, it was late and I felt hollow in a familiar way. I did not go home. Home had been quiet lately, and not in a good way. Dana had been distant for weeks, clipped in messages, careful with her time, protective of her phone in a way that did not match the person I thought I knew. I told myself it was stress, that weddings do that to people, that my schedule had bent her patience thin. That story had been convenient. Tonight, with the hospital smell still clinging to my clothes, I wanted something simple. I wanted to see her face when she did not expect me. The drive across town blurred. Red lights felt longer than usual. I parked in the spot behind her building, the one she said was always open after 10. The hallway smelled like cleaning solution and old carpet. Her door was shut. There was light leaking from the frame. I knocked once, lightly, then again when nothing happened. The door opened enough to show a man in socks, bare feet planted like he belonged there. He looked at me without surprise. He did not ask who I was. He did not step back. He filled the doorway and glanced over his shoulder toward the interior of the apartment. His posture was relaxed, casual, territorial. He spoke as if he were doing me a favor, as if I were a delivery that arrived at the wrong hour. The words themselves barely registered. What registered was the assumption behind them. I said my name. I said why I was there. The man did not move. He smiled in a way that suggested familiarity with the space behind him. I could see the living room over his shoulder, the couch angled differently than I remembered, a jacket draped over the back that was not mine, a pair of boots by the door that had never touched my floor. I asked him to step aside. He did not. From the hallway, Dana appeared. She did not rush. She did not look confused. She leaned around the corner just enough to see me, and the moment our eyes met, her face went still. Not fear, not guilt, calculation. I had seen it before in patients deciding whether to tell the truth. It was the look of someone measuring damage. Everything that mattered happened in the next few seconds. I understood that this was not an accident. I understood that the man in socks did not expect me and yet was not worried. I understood that Dana had prepared for collisions like this, even if she had not planned for tonight. I understood that whatever explanation she would offer would be shaped for survival, not honesty. I stepped back into the hallway. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask questions that would have answers designed for me. I noticed details instead. The second phone on the kitchen counter, charging with a cable that was not hers. The way the thermostat was set lower than she liked. The faint outline on the wall where a frame had been moved. The small, efficient changes that happen when someone lives somewhere, not visits. I left. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. In the stairwell, my phone vibrated. A message came through, and then another, rapid and insistent. I did not read them. I walked to my car and sat for a minute with the engine off, hands on the wheel, breathing until the hospital faded and the apartment stayed sharp. On the drive home, memory reorganized itself. Late nights that had been explained by work dinners. A weekend trip canceled for a headache. Money transferred to cover a deposit she said had increased. A suggestion that we delay the wedding because timing felt off. None of it proved anything by itself. Together, it formed a pattern I could not unsee. I did not sleep. At dawn I showered, changed, and went back out. There were practical things to do before the emotional ones. I called the bank to flag our shared account for review. I called the venue to ask about cancellation terms, not to cancel yet, but to understand exposure. I called my friend from residency, Miranda Collins, because she had known Dana long enough to tell me if I was losing perspective. Miranda sounded surprised to hear from me. She asked if I was calling from work. She asked how I was holding up after the week Dana had had. That sentence stopped me. I asked what she meant. Miranda explained, casually, that Dana had told her we had taken a break, that the wedding was on pause, that I was overwhelmed and needed space. Miranda apologized for not checking in sooner. She assumed distance was mutual. That was the first confirmation that the story I lived in was not the one being told. I thanked Miranda and ended the call. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to recall the last time Dana had said we were on a break. I could not, because it had not happened. Later that morning, another name surfaced. Luke Moreno. I found it because Dana had changed the emergency contact on one of our utilities months ago, back when she said the company required an update. Luke's name was there now. I remembered the man in socks and understood that he was not passing through. He was installed. I went to work. Routine helps. The department was steady. My department head, Dr. Raymond Keene, asked if I was all right because my focus was sharp in a way that often follows disruption. I told him I had a personal issue and would manage. He nodded and left it there. Trust is built in small increments, and I had paid into that account for years. By midday, messages from Dana stacked up. Explanations evolved. First there was confusion, then anger, then concern. I read them all once, slowly, and did not respond. When you answer too soon, you shape the lie for the other person. I wanted to see the full arc. In the afternoon, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Luke. He sounded measured, almost respectful, and asked to talk. I agreed to meet in a public place after my shift. There was no benefit in avoiding him. Avoidance preserves fantasy. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Luke arrived on time. He did not apologize. He did not posture. He explained his understanding of the situation as he had been told. He believed Dana and I had ended things weeks ago. He believed my work made me unstable. He believed he had been helping her through a transition. Listening to him was like hearing a version of myself recited by someone who had learned it secondhand. I corrected him where facts mattered. I showed him messages with dates. I showed him the lease addendum with my name still present. He went quiet and stared at the table. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. He said he needed to leave. He stood and went without a scene. That night, Dana tried to come by my place. I did not open the door. I watched her through the peephole as she stood, knocked, checked her phone, knocked again, and left. The sequence repeated an hour later. Control does not like being denied. The last event of the day came unexpectedly. An email landed from an HR address at the hospital, requesting a brief meeting the following morning regarding a concern raised anonymously. The language was neutral. The timing was not. I understood then that this was not a single betrayal, but a system. It involved narratives tailored to whoever was listening. It involved preemptive defenses. It involved planning. I slept a few hours and woke before my alarm. The shape of the week ahead was clear. There would be conversations that could not be undone and consequences that would not soften with time. What surprised me was not fear, but clarity. When illusions drop, the mind stops negotiating. By the time the sun came up, I had decided how to proceed. I would document everything. I would speak once, carefully, to the people who mattered. I would not rush. I would not dramatize. I would let reality do what it does best when given space. The man in socks had opened a door. Everything else would follow. The HR meeting was scheduled for 8:30. I arrived early, not because I was worried, but because punctuality changes the tone of a room before anyone speaks. The hallway outside the office was quiet. I reviewed the timeline in my head, not to rehearse a defense, but to ensure accuracy. Facts hold up better when they are simple. The HR representative asked neutral questions about workload, stress, and recent changes in my personal life. I answered carefully and directly. I described my schedule, my evaluations, and the incident at the apartment without embellishment. I did not accuse. I did not speculate. When asked whether anyone might have reason to question my stability, I said there had been a relationship breakdown and left it there. The meeting ended quickly. The tone suggested the concern lacked substance. That was the first failed attempt to move a chess piece against me. By mid-morning, the department had returned to its usual pace. Between patients, I received a message from Miranda saying Dana had contacted her in distress and asked for help. Miranda declined to intervene and told Dana to speak to me directly. That refusal mattered. Dana's circle was already shrinking. At lunch, I pulled records. Utilities, shared subscriptions, the lease addendum. Each document was ordinary on its own. Together, they showed a pattern of quiet substitution. Emergency contact changed. Secondary user added. Notification settings rerouted. There was no single signature moment. Only a series of small administrative acts that created a second household without acknowledging the first. I left work and drove past Dana's building without stopping. The parking spot behind it was no longer empty. Luke's truck was there. The sight did not sting as much as it clarified. I continued on to the bank and requested statements printed with annotations. The clerk asked whether everything was all right. I said I needed a paper trail. She understood. That afternoon, a new name entered the picture. Neil Harper, Dana's supervisor. I knew him only from a few work functions where he seemed attentive in the way managers learn to be. His name appeared on an email chain Dana had forwarded to our shared address months earlier, the one about a schedule change to accommodate family needs. I read it again. The wording was careful, sympathetic, and vague. The accommodation was generous. The reason was not verifiable. I called Neil and asked for a brief conversation. He agreed and suggested a call rather than a meeting. His voice carried concern when I explained why I was reaching out. He said Dana had told him we were separated and that she was supporting me through a difficult period. He said he believed he was helping by offering flexibility. He said he felt misled. The call ended with an apology that was not directed at me so much as at the situation itself. As the day progressed, the messages from Dana shifted tone again. The urgency softened into reason. She suggested counseling. She suggested a pause. She suggested time. None of those words addressed the structure she had built. They were designed to slow me down. In the evening, Luke texted. He asked if we could speak again. We met at the same coffee shop. He looked tired in a way that suggested sleep had not come easily. He had questions now, not accusations. He asked about dates, about the wedding, about money. I answered. He showed me messages that mirrored mine with minor differences. Where she told me she was overwhelmed, she told him she was relieved. Where she told him I was volatile, she told me he was transient. The symmetry was precise. Luke mentioned a medical appointment Dana had attended weeks earlier. He said she used his insurance because she claimed mine was no longer active. He said the visit involved complications and follow-up. He did not know details. The timing struck me immediately. During that period, I had been on consecutive night rotations with no gaps. I told him that. He looked down and nodded. The implications settled between us without needing words. We left separately. I sat in my car and wrote everything down while it was fresh. Dates, times, statements. Accuracy mattered more than emotion. When you allow memory to blur, you give space for denial. At home, I found an envelope taped to my door. It was from Dana. Inside were copies of a few photos from earlier in our relationship and a handwritten note urging calm. The choice of objects was intentional. Nostalgia is a lever. I placed the envelope in a folder with the rest. The next morning brought another escalation. A colleague mentioned, carefully, that there were whispers about my stress level. The source was not named. The content was vague. That kind of rumor spreads because it is incomplete. I asked my colleague to document anything specific he heard and thanked him for telling me. Transparency is disarming. I requested a meeting with Dr. Keene and laid out the situation. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he asked for documentation. I provided it. He asked whether I wanted the hospital to intervene. I said I wanted fairness and accuracy. He agreed and assured me the department would not act on anonymous claims without evidence. That assurance closed another door Dana had attempted to open. By the end of the week, the narrative began to fracture publicly. Miranda informed me that Dana had been asked to explain conflicting stories to friends. Neil had adjusted Dana's schedule pending review. Luke had moved his belongings out of the apartment. None of this was dramatic. It was administrative. Systems correct themselves when false inputs are removed. Dana finally asked to meet. I agreed on conditions. We met in a neutral space with clear boundaries. She arrived composed, with a prepared posture. She acknowledged mistakes in a way that spread responsibility thinly. She suggested misunderstandings. She suggested overlap rather than design. I did not argue. I asked for specifics, dates, decisions, documentation. The conversation stalled where facts were required. When she realized the usual tools were ineffective, she changed approach. She warned me about reputational harm, about how things could look if pressed. The warning revealed more than it concealed. I ended the meeting without responding to it. That night, the final twist of the part arrived quietly. An email from the wedding venue outlined cancellation penalties and noted that the deposit had been partially funded from an account not listed on the contract. The account name was unfamiliar. I traced it back to Dana. She had supplemented the deposit with money borrowed under false pretenses. The liability was hers alone. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Clarity does that. There were still unknowns ahead, but the direction was set. The system Dana built depended on silence, delay, and control. Each day those elements weakened. By the time the third week began, the situation had stopped feeling personal and started behaving like a system under stress. When one component failed, pressure shifted elsewhere. Dana no longer controlled the direction of events, but she continued to apply force wherever she thought leverage still existed. It started with silence. For 2 days, there were no messages, no missed calls, no attempts at mediation through friends. That kind of silence is rarely acceptance. It is preparation. At work, the atmosphere changed subtly. People were polite in the same way they are around ongoing litigation. Conversations ended when I approached. Nothing overt, nothing actionable, but enough to register. I documented it anyway. Patterns matter. The HR follow-up came midweek. This time the meeting included a second representative and language about duty of care. I asked directly what new information had prompted the escalation. They cited concerns about judgment under fatigue and emotional distraction. I asked for sources. They declined to disclose names. I asked for specifics. There were none. I asked whether any patient outcomes were implicated. They said no. The meeting ended with no action taken. I walked straight from HR to Dr. Keen's office. He was already aware. He had pulled my caseload, my peer reviews, my outcomes, and my scheduling history. The data contradicted the narrative being suggested. He told me the department would stand behind documented performance. He also told me, quietly, that someone outside the hospital had been persistent. That was the confirmation I needed. Dana had moved from damage control to preemption. That evening, Luke called again. He did not want to meet this time. He wanted to be finished. He told me Dana had tried to reframe everything after our last conversation, claiming I was manipulating timelines and pressuring him. She suggested he might face consequences if he continued communicating with me. Luke said that was when he decided to disengage completely. Before ending the call, Luke shared one last detail. Dana had asked him to accompany her to a clinic appointment scheduled for the following week. She told him it was routine follow-up. The timing overlapped with the day I was scheduled for a double shift, something she knew well. I thanked him and ended the call. I did not confront Dana about it. Confrontation accelerates lies. Instead, I focused on containment. I contacted a lawyer recommended by a colleague who specialized in family and contract law. We reviewed the engagement agreement, the shared accounts, and the lease structure. He advised immediate separation of finances, formal notice to the venue, and written communication only. He also advised me not to speculate publicly about medical matters. Facts only. That advice would matter later. The next escalation came from an unexpected direction. Dana's mother called. She asked to meet. I agreed, again under conditions. We met in a quiet cafe. Dana's mother spoke first. She expressed concern, confusion, and disappointment. She said Dana had told the family I was struggling and needed space, that my workload had made me unpredictable. I responded with dates, documents, and the sequence of events as they occurred. I did not editorialize. I watched as understanding replaced loyalty in small increments. By the end of the meeting, Dana's mother asked for copies. I provided them. Family dynamics shift quickly when evidence replaces reassurance. 2 days later, the clinic called me. They were verifying insurance information related to Dana. My name had been listed as a secondary contact. I declined involvement and requested my information be removed. The representative hesitated, then complied. That call was brief, but it confirmed the direction things were moving. At work, the whispers stopped as abruptly as they had begun. HR sent a neutral email closing the inquiry due to lack of substantiation. No apology. No acknowledgement. Closure in bureaucratic form. I saved it. Dana reappeared that night outside my building. She did not knock. She waited. When I came down, she spoke calmly, as if nothing irreversible had happened. She suggested we could reset if we stopped involving other people. She framed exposure as cruelty. She framed silence as maturity. I told her communication would continue through counsel and went back inside. The following week brought the most destabilizing development. A mutual acquaintance forwarded me a message Dana had sent, asking whether I had ever expressed concern about fatherhood given my schedule. The question was not innocent. It was scaffolding. I responded once, clearly, stating I would not discuss speculative matters and that all communication should go through my attorney. The acquaintance apologized and withdrew. The clinic appointment happened. I did not attend. I did not need to. The aftermath reached me anyway. Dana's sister called, distressed, asking what was happening. She said Dana had told the family different things at different times. She said timelines did not add up. She said there was now a medical reality the family could not ignore. I listened and told her I would not comment beyond what was already documented. The system began to fail loudly. Dana missed work. Neil placed her on administrative leave pending clarification of schedule misuse. The venue sent a formal notice regarding cancellation liabilities. The landlord requested clarification about unauthorized occupants over the past months. Each institution acted independently. The convergence was not coordinated, but it was inevitable. Dana sent one final message directly to me. It was long, carefully written, and framed around shared history. It acknowledged some wrongdoing while reframing intent. It asked for discretion in exchange for cooperation. I forwarded it to my attorney and did not reply. That night, I reviewed the entire sequence from the beginning. The 14-hour shift, the door, the socks, the calculation in her eyes. Every step since had followed a consistent logic. Dana had not panicked. She had managed. She had built redundancies. She had assumed time would soften edges and fatigue would blunt resistance. What she had not accounted for was documentation, or the way systems react when fed conflicting inputs, or the fact that silence, when strategic, removes oxygen rather than provides it. The end did not arrive with shouting or confessions. It arrived in envelopes, emails, and scheduled meetings that did not invite emotion. By the time Part 4 began, the outcome was already determined. What remained was execution. My attorney sent formal notice to the venue, the landlord, and the bank. Each letter was factual, restrained, and final. The venue responded first. The cancellation clause was enforced because the misrepresentation of funding violated the agreement. Dana was solely responsible for penalties and lost deposits. The venue copied her on the response. She called my attorney twice. He did not return the calls. The landlord followed. Their audit showed unauthorized occupancy over several months. The lease addendum Dana filed without my consent did not protect her. The apartment became unstable overnight. Luke's name appeared nowhere in the official paperwork, which meant the liability stayed with Dana alone. A move-out deadline was issued. At work, the closure of the HR inquiry stabilized my days. Dr. Keene circulated a brief departmental memo reaffirming performance standards and reminding staff not to engage in rumor. That single message did more than any confrontation could have. People returned to normal behavior quickly once authority removed ambiguity. Dana's administrative leave became formal review. Neil contacted me once, carefully, to clarify dates. I provided documentation already shared. He thanked me and said nothing more. His silence afterward told me enough. The family fracture widened. Dana's mother sent a message acknowledging receipt of documents and saying she needed time. Dana's sister stopped reaching out altogether. Support systems do not collapse loudly. They erode quietly when trust fails. The legal disentanglement accelerated. Shared accounts were closed. Transfers reversed where possible. The remainder was documented as debt. My attorney advised me not to pursue recovery beyond separation. Prolonged conflict benefits the person with less to lose. I accepted that advice. Dana attempted one last maneuver. She requested mediation through a mutual acquaintance, framing it as closure. I declined and instructed all contact to go through counsel. That boundary held. Once avenues closed consistently, attempts stop. The clinic matter resolved without my involvement. I learned through a third party that Dana had continued care under her own insurance and removed my name from all records. The outcome was not shared. It did not need to be. Some consequences belonged to the people who created them. The wedding date passed quietly. I worked a full shift. There were no dramatic moments, no sudden realizations. Life continued because it always does. That continuity felt grounding. Weeks later, the final administrative notice arrived. Dana's employment review concluded with termination for misrepresentation of schedule and misuse of accommodations. The letter cited policy language and effective dates. No commentary. No appeal noted. The system closed its file. I encountered Dana once more, by chance, at a grocery store near my building. She looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. She did not approach. Neither did I. The distance was mutual and complete. Professionally, the incident faded into background noise. My evaluations remained consistent. My schedule returned to its usual rhythm. Colleagues stopped referencing the period entirely. Institutions move forward when problems resolve cleanly. Privately, the recalibration took longer. Trust does not regenerate automatically. It rebuilds slowly, through alignment between words and actions. I did not rush that process. I did not replace one certainty with another. The last piece fell into place when my attorney confirmed the final dissolution of all shared obligations. No pending matters. No unresolved liabilities. The file was closed. I archived it. Looking back, the defining moment was not the door opening or the man in socks. It was the realization that deception had been operational, not impulsive. Once I understood that, the rest followed logically. I did not seek revenge. I did not need to. Exposure achieved what confrontation never could. Systems corrected. Relationships redefined themselves. The outcome was not dramatic, but it was permanent. Dana lost housing, employment, and credibility within the same quarter. Those were not punishments I imposed. They were consequences triggered by choices interacting with reality. I retained my career, my reputation, and my autonomy. That was not luck. It was documentation, restraint, and refusal to participate in manufactured chaos. The story ended the way real stories often do. Not with noise, but with clarity.